Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Barrens Chat Podcast. I'm Son, and with me tonight is my co-host, Guck. This is a podcast about World of Warcraft by two guys who play. Guck, this is it. This is the 1-year anniversary, if you will, of our podcast. We've been doing this for a year. Actually, the money for the RSS feed just came out of my bank account last week. My wife is asking me about it. So lots to be excited about. I think you and I both learned a lot over the year of podcasting. Some exciting stuff coming up about WoW. An animated series, if you will, similar to what they did for Battle for Azeroth. At least that's how it looks. Gamescom's this week. I'm expecting a release date on probably Thursday when they do the animated series. What do you think? What are you excited about, and how was the week in gaming?
I am excited for a lot of stuff right now. I didn't even know about the animated series announcement until you told me. Apparently that went out on Twitter. I saw it now on Wowhead. I'm excited. I think that, this is kind of a part of the art team, and the art team always does phenomenal work. So this is going to be an extension, I believe, of that work. I am excited to see what kind of stories they plan to tell with this. For me, I want to get engaged with this story because it feels like every expansion kind of goes on and is this individually contained idea. At least starting with Legion, because that's where my experience really begins. In Legion, you start out with the enemy of the Burning Legion, and that's the start, and the end point is the finale of that conflict, and that story is relatively contained. Then we had BFA, and, geographically and narratively, we were constrained to these new islands, and, of course, then we get the N'Zoth stuff, but that still is relatively contained. With Shadowlands, this is really kind of an overarching story that connects and ends a lot of really cool lore from WoW's entire lifetime. I mean, we're getting Kael'thas, we're getting Lady Vash, we're getting Draka, we're getting potentially Arthas, we're getting Uther,
Kel'Thuzad, yeah,
Kel'Thuzad. We're getting so many major players that I don't want to miss the narrative that they use to put them all together, because I think that's going to be cool.
Yeah, that's like the one thing about this expansion, right? Obviously, you and I, we take breaks from the game. And I think this expansion I'm going to play through. Now, will I do endgame content the entire way through? I don't know. I would expect some sort of burnout, especially if, this whole one covenant thing doesn't really work out and I get frustrated. But I am going to stay subbed and play every single week this expansion. Every single reset, I'm going to get on the game and at least participate. I'm excited about this story. I'm excited about the gameplay, the raid, the dungeons, everything that is coming with it. And I just, based off of the developers at least, responding to criticism and potentially changing design and the class reworks that they've done thus far, I think it might be worth my while to stick around the entire time and at least not take a break. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. And what I've found myself getting excited about as well, we've been through essentially every bit of content that we were given on the beta and now on the PTR, to the extent that I feel pretty comfortable with what 9.0 is going to bring. So now I'm already excited for 9.1. I want to see the big change that they implement. Are we going to see a follow-up expansion or a follow-up patch that gives us new zones? Are we going to be seeing something, new in the Shadowlands? Is there more stuff still yet to be discovered, right? Uncovered material, parts of the map that we haven't seen. I'm thinking, in BFA, for the most part, Mechagon and Nazjatar were surprises initially. Of course, there were definitely some hints to it, especially if you were doing the Alliance story. I think there were a lot of lore hints there, especially in the northern zone. I forget what it's called. I think Stormsong Valley. But there's a lot of there was some N'Zoth, but a lot of Nazjatar themed stuff there. I'm curious now to really get into what is 9.1, what is 9.2. Are there going to be new zones? Are they going to change the existing zones? It seems like Shadowlands is entirely in the Shadowlands, so I don't think we're going to see existing Azeroth stuff get affected. So, what totally brand new stuff is there in the Shadowlands that we have no idea is coming? I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, I think that's like probably one of the more interesting parts of it, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not the biggest Mechagon fan or Nazjatar fan, but I do appreciate what like having a new island pop up means for at least your day-to-day gameplay. I'm not a fan of either Nazjatar or Mechagon, which I know is like weird for the podcast community because everybody, everybody unanimously, I think, pretty much hates Nazjatar, but a lot of people love Mechagon, and I kind of hate it other than the dungeon. And it is a good thing, though, to have things like that in the game, and where the hell is a new zone going to come from in the Shadowlands? You know what I mean? Like, what sort of foes are awaiting us in the first big patch of the expansion? I think that's, like, really cool stuff to get into.
Yeah, I will say, I think the hype about Mechagon and Nazjatar existed mostly when it was current, and it was the current patch. At that time, it wasn't that bad. Obviously, BFA did a very bad / weird job with catch-up, but Mechagon wasn't that bad when it came out, because you would essentially just ride around the island, click a bunch of different stuff, and depending on what you were interested in farming, whether it was galvanics or spare parts or whatever, you could just kind of do a few things to get it done with, and it felt like you could complete the zone's daily requirement in a quick visit to Mechagon, and that wasn't that tedious to begin with. It's incredibly tedious now. And really, I think you said it, like, the dungeon really carried Mechagon, especially early on when it was essentially like Legion's Karazhan, where it was that mega dungeon. It felt cool. It just had a better feel to it. Now that it's a Mythic Plus, it's just kind of one of the dungeons that you run. But hard mode and the standard, the original standard Operation Mechagon, where it's continuous, that was pretty cool when it was current, but yeah, it didn't last. What I'm thinking about with Shadowlands, to hop back onto that, we have 4 main zones dedicated to a covenant, and then we have the Maw. We're not going to have a 5th covenant, so we're not going to have like a 5th party that comes in and gets involved. I think we're going to see a zone that's similar to the Maw, where it is a more raw, untamed section of the Shadowlands or something like that. Because, yeah, it just, covenants are so important. It doesn't make sense to introduce a new covenant, especially because they're not going to have an ability. You won't be gaining renown for a covenant that they release later, unless this is like a separate covenant that everyone is grinding, separate from your own covenant. I don't think it will be that way. I think maybe they do something like, they could do it where it's kind of like Suramar in Legion, where it's like this neutral kind of party that you convince to be more on your side by helping them deal with their problem. And then later on in Shadowlands, they come in to help you deal with the problem with the jailer. Something like that, maybe. But yeah, dude, I'm excited now for the content that has no leaks, no spoilers, because we've really just worked through all the content that we've been given to this point.
Yeah, and like, obviously, like, we're both, I think, expecting a release date at Gamescom on Thursday, more than likely. I know they're doing a big Call of Duty announcement Wednesday, and with the animated series on Thursday, I would expect a release date with that. I am very stressed with this announcement. Like, I have a lot of real life stuff that is gonna come up around the beginning of October. Obviously, I want this game out as soon as possible so I can enjoy it. I'm very nervous, real life stress wise, about trying to get my game time in. You know what I mean? So hopefully, hopefully we do see an end of September, beginning of October release for the player base. For me, kind of nervous about it between my kids and my wife and I both having school, and I'm moving again in the fall. So we'll see what happens with that. Very, very excited. I do expect to see, a release date probably sometime early in October. And like I enjoyed, I played Exiles Reach yesterday. I told you that before we started recording. Very cool and interesting experience. Now, obviously as an experienced player going through it, it has some tedious tasks in it, but I think it has a lot of important tasks that teaches new players how to adapt to the game, teaches you how to vendor stuff, how to buy stuff off of a vendor. If you're playing a range class, how to keep your range and use like specific class abilities. I think they've done a really good job with the early part of that zone. Now, I was also testing it on the PTR. I did notice a bug that did not allow me to continue forward with the quest chain I was on. So I reported the bug, let them know, hey, this is messed up, and logged off. But I got to like level 7. I think that goes to level 10. It took probably a half hour to get to level 7. So I think the time constraint on Exile's Reach is probably pretty good. I would expect it to take a newer player a little bit longer, but really cool stuff, and I hope that this attracts a lot of new players into the game. I think it should. I think it's a really cool system, and I'm very glad to see that the development on that went well.
Yeah, I don't know if it will effectively attract those new players, but hopefully the new players that discover Shadowlands for, maybe the story or the art or something that, a friend told them about that they thought is cool, when they actually start the game and play it, that doesn't immediately push them away. Because in Legion, when you started, that's when they did a revamped new character start, where you started on the airship and they ran you through some of your abilities, then they dropped you into the scenario and gave you the rest of your abilities, and you just kind of had to go on from there. I'm excited to see this, but I'm curious to see what sort of effects it will have on the community at large. Because, yeah, like you said, I want this to bring new players, not just through the game, but hopefully into the end game. With any hobby, the more people that are into it, it's a double-edged sword, because you can argue that, well, they're going to try and adjust the hobby that you like to fit more people and less fit you by being, less niche and more kind of general. But I think with more people brings more interest, and with more interest comes more funding and attention from the developers. So I'm hoping that this all ends up being a net positive thing, helping to raise the bar a little bit, raise the kind of the skill floor up a little bit, should hopefully help everyone.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And like I'm just so ready to see everything else that this expansion has to offer. Like just playing characters on the PTR, messing around with the class changes, just so much cool stuff. I participated in some of the giveaways that the big content creators are doing, so hopefully I can get a beta key out of one of those and experiment with that. One of our friends got it, and I was watching him stream it, and I was like, hey, show me the soul conduit. So like just trying to check out and see what everything's about, and it looks really cool, and I think it's cool to see an almost complete game, and hopefully it'll be here for us soon. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about that I did not bring up to you. So the consensus is that right now with Castle Nathria and the World First race coming up, obviously, Alliance might be the way to play. Do you think that this affects the Horde Alliance ratio, or do you think we're just going to see the Horde guilds, the big top 10 Horde guilds, faction change to Alliance? They all make dwarfs so they can drop their bleeds and then proceed back to Horde after this raid tier. How do you think that this affects the game?
I 100% think that is what you mentioned with race changing or essentially faction changing. I think that is 100% what we're going to see at the high end. Think about MDI, when the meta before Awakened was every single person is either a rogue or a night elf. And, night elves need to shadow meld at certain points, or you need to rogue and stealth, or you need to druid stealth. That meta drove people to change race from Horde to Alliance. Just straight up. There is no reason there's no way you're going to get high up in the MDI rankings without strictly following that meta. And if you watch MDI, you understand that, because every time you see a dungeon that has a certain comp, both teams are usually running the same comp. For Season 4, we saw a lot of Triple Hunter, and then you'd also see double DK with a Demon Hunter, right? And that was the meta, and people ran it, and that's what you run. So with the raid, the top 10 guilds are 100% going to do this. They will just use the gold that they've gained from selling mythic carries and selling heroic sales and all of the stuff that they've been doing through the end of BFA, and that gold is going to turn into Blizzard tokens that they will then buy these services and just switch over. And who knows, maybe Alliance will also be the way to go in the next raid, and they'll stay that way. But if not, they're going to take the money that they made from selling Mythic Nathria and then use that gold to change back into Horde. I think the real question is, how much of a trickle-down effect will this have? How many Horde guilds that are, just doing your standard progression, getting a couple bosses a week, maybe a couple bosses a month, maybe, are they also going to feel pressure to switch? That I don't think so. I think the WoW token barrier is psychologically a big barrier, because for a lot of people that's just straight up money, and people are already playing. They're already paying to play. They don't want to pay extra just to advance a little bit more, and some people will. So the people who will are, going to find themselves in a brand new environment, hopefully finding those other hardcore guilds that want them. But I don't expect there to be a huge trickle down effect. What do you expect to happen in Shadowlands? Because this is, again, not only is this something that I think will only pertain to the top 10+%, but it's also probably temporary,
Yeah, I don't think it affects anybody outside of the top 100 at all. I really, my hope personally is that it ends the faction war and I get to play Alliance and still play with my friends that are all Horde. I secretly want to hang out in Stormwind all the time. I want to faction change my character to a fucking gnome, and I want to chill in Stormwind in my off time. I love the Alliance cities way more than I love the Horde cities. There it is. I'm out of the closet. I want the faction war to end so I can play Alliance and still play with all my friends.
Wow, dude! Wow, that's a big reveal.
I don't know, dude. It's
these are the type of reveals that have to wait a year in the making.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like Jaina and Bane are great friends, and Anduin and Bane are great friends, and Thrall, and like they can communicate and work together, and Alliance and Horde have worked together so many times before. Why the hell do we have this faction war? The Horde don't even have a war chief. Let's all be Alliance and go on. I understand that there's a large part of the community that still wants like their PvP and their RPG or whatever, and like I get it, that's fine, but it doesn't really exist anymore, right? Like as a Horde player, I go talk to the guy that makes me a mercenary and I queue up as Alliance for Battlegrounds all the time. Gets me a faster queue. Why would I not do it, right? And it's the same like in Arena, you play Horde versus Horde all the time, or Alliance versus Alliance, and so on. In rated Battlegrounds, it's Horde versus Horde, or Alliance versus Alliance, or, if you get matched up with an opposing faction. It's still the same thing. I don't think that there's any real reason other than these people that like their role playing that there is no faction war, and maybe some people that like world PvP, and I think world PvP can still exist for sure, and I would think that world PvP would be great if it was like a guild versus guild thing, and you had a guild that you had beef with or whatever, and it could be more of a community based thing and a server based thing, as opposed to you see 75 different servers on your layer and you're just getting gangbanged by 40 Alliance.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option. And then also Loktar Ogar, so there's also that.
Yeah, I don't get me wrong, I see it from both ways. This is just my opinion. And obviously, like other people who have different opinions, I respect them and I understand them. That's just how I would like it, and if somebody like you, like, you know, you're more of a for the horde guy. A lot of the people that we play with are like, screw the alliance, I don't want to do that. I personally would love to play alliance, but obviously, like, my friends and my community play horde, so that's more so what I participate in.
Yeah, I'll let the cat out of the bag. When we were, and no one from Blizzard listens to our podcast, so I can freely say whatever the fuck I want. Before WoW Classic, I played on a WoW TBC private server, and it wasn't a question. I wanted to play Alliance. I wanted to go through the vanilla Alliance experience. You know, I was a dwarf, so I started in Ironforge, and I had that snow area to start in, and then, you know, I don't think I flew over. You have to walk over first. So I made it over to Stormwind and did all of the Westfall stuff.
The tram, dude, the deep room tram.
Take the tram. Yeah, see, like, all of that stuff. If I had just been a staunch Horde guy, I would never have experienced it, because in Classic I did Horde, and I just wouldn't. And it, not only to get the experience, but a genuine experience where I was a low level taking the tram and moving from zone to zone. That was. Without doing that, I don't think my WoW experience would have been complete. So I'm really, really glad that I did that.
Yeah, and Alliance have the two best cities in the game, and I don't care what anybody says, you cannot convince me that a single Horde city is better than Stormwind or Ironforge. Nobody will convince me of that.
I would say if Thunder Bluff wasn't literally an elevator ride away, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a continent, it would rival some cities. I don't think it would ever be as good as Stormwind. Stormwind is, I think, supposed to be the best city. Ironforge, I don't think is that great. I think Thunder Bluff, if they were placed in comparably convenient areas, I think Thunder Bluff rivals it.
Okay, all right, that's fair, I guess. I disagree, but I'll you know, I agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. Yeah, you fucking Alliance traitor.
I want to make my warlock a gnome so bad I can't even put into words to you.
Let's we don't have too much to talk about this week, but one of the things we wanted to talk about was just the podcast, about what has happened over this past year. Saad, you mentioned that you just rebuild again for our pod. We paid the Podbean daddy. We paid our fee so that we can keep existing. Let's start with this. I think this is an interesting question. Do you have a favorite episode, and why?
I don't. I think our episodes, especially recently, have increased in quality drastically from where we were. I think early on, like, we tried to stretch out the episodes into like an hour, and now we just kind of talk as long as I think, you know, is appropriate for whatever data that we have to go over in the podcast. And I think it's increased our quality, although we don't have a lot of quantity in the episode. And I think that's fine. So I think every episode improves, and I think my favorite episode is just always going to be the next one.
That is the most political answer. Like, you are running for Barrens Chat mayor. That is the most, you know, no one can disagree. I will say I do agree with you on it, obviously, because that is just a factual statement. I like two episodes. Two episodes really stand out for me, and conveniently, I think there are two most viewed episodes. The first one is the episode where you broke the experience gains in retail off of running Korak's Revenge when the Alterok Valley event went live. If you were leveling back then, I think they still had the quarantine XP buff, and you had heirlooms that would stack with it, and you could run this Korak's Revenge event that Saad, we saw his screenshots. He had Titan panel up and was just flying through experience.
Yeah, it was pre-quarantine. It was like, it went for a long time though, but it went like through the holidays. So from the end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020.
Oh, okay. So it was a little bit before then, but still, like the experience per hour, I remember being ridiculous, like 2 million or something after you won and turned in the quests and just got a massive spike of XP.
There is a reason I have 15 120s and I'm very close to having like 20 of them.
Yeah. And we were the first ones to get that out there. The date of that podcast is still before most of the Wowhead articles talking about the new meta for Korak's Revenge. So that was huge. And then our other episode was more of a me episode with Classic is Not Vanilla, where we talked about how the Classic community had changed essentially the exact same game of Vanilla, but the way that it was being played, the interface had drastically changed the community and the game kind of hand in hand because it's such a social game. Like, leveling didn't become a journey. It became a dungeon grind. The community at large enforced a ton of, best in slot. This is meta. That kind of mentality that was largely antithetical to vanilla as a exploration, as a discovery, as this new thing. Classic as a game came out and was and still is a completely fine-tuned, fully optimized, fully worked out game that has, if you think about it, a very linear style to it, where you just you go here, you obtain these certain items, then you go and you obtain more items to later in 4 to 5 months get these new items. And I would say largely, and I think in that episode we were largely hitting on how the community as a whole changed classic WoW to something drastically different from vanilla WoW.
Yeah, and I think that's like every game now, right? And I know they're trying to make Shadowlands like this, and it's just not possible. There's too much information on the internet. Metas will form in everything. And you're right. That was a good episode. You also had a good solo episode. I would like to say too, like, I don't read off of things a lot in this podcast. There's a reason for that, because I'm terrible at reading. And Guck edits every single episode. I try to help and do like a little bit of editing my own audio, and I submit it over to Guck. And so to Guck for doing a lot of really like the more so hard labor that goes on with this. Thank you for it. I am a complete idiot with editing and any sort of thing like technology at all. I'm a complete boomer. So Guck puts a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears into this, and I pretty much just talk and pay for it, I guess, which is fine. And but like it's like really like this podcast doesn't come out without Guck. So to you, thank you, and to everybody listening, thank you a lot too.
Yeah. Honestly, we would probably do this if there weren't any listeners, because a year ago we were doing it and there weren't any listeners. But the fact that we have grown, some semblance of an audience, it's really motivating. So I do appreciate all of the content that we get from you guys. When you guys tweet at us on Twitter, the few rates and reviews that we've gotten on Apple Podcast, all that stuff helps keep us going. And, now we have 60 episodes live right now. This will be technically our 61st episode, but the 60th standard one, because we've done one live episode. To think that right now we're getting on average a little over 250 views per episode, to me is astounding. That is way more than I figured we would ever get. The fact that it's kind of growing. We had a massive spike in October when Classic went live, and we did a lot of really Classic-centric content, but with the waning popularity of Classic, we've really had to rely on the fans out there who enjoy the content, who enjoy WoW as a game, either retail or Classic or both, or maybe you just enjoyed the game in the past and you want to see what's going on in the game right now. All of that stuff we appreciate immensely. It's incredible to see the numbers go up, but the numbers are just one thing. It's important to understand and realize that behind those numbers are hopefully, real people out there clicking and interacting with our content. And I am, glad and flattered and honored that, so many of you guys out there are generous enough to give us your time. And, I appreciate that. And I hope to give you guys another year of solid content. I mean, we're going into a new expansion. There's going to be so much stuff. We're going to cover the new race for world first. We're going to cover the new dungeon meta, the new raid meta. We're going to talk about the class changes, the covenants, the zones. We're going to talk about, what's going on in our guild, what's going on in our server. We're going to talk about the economy, how we're making gold and how most people are making gold and what's going on. And there's just so much stuff on the horizon, and I'm excited to get into it with you guys. So I hope you guys stick along for another year-long ride.
Yeah, and there's no better time to play WoW than any sort of launch event that they have, whether it's classic or retail. And obviously, as classic content keeps coming in, I know neither one of us are playing it right now, but like, we're interested in classic. It is part of World of Warcraft, and like that's our main focus. Like, we don't talk about other games in this podcast. To be honest, I really don't enjoy other Blizzard games, but anything World of Warcraft related, we're looking forward to. Definitely looking forward to Nax and Classic coming up. Burning Crusade Classic coming up. Looking forward to that. The launch of Shadowlands. I'm just so pumped. And if you're listening and you disagree with either Guck or myself, and you tweet at us at Barrens Chat Pod, at Guckyman, at Saudi LOL, I'll interact with you. I am interested in how other people play the game, right? Like, Guck and I pretty much play the same way, and I think, our gameplay wise probably makes up more of the community than people think. We're like, we have ahead of the curve pretty much every tier except one, and we haven't gotten a cutting edge yet, right? So our goal for Shadowlands is to strive for cutting edge, but for the most part, we've been AOTC and we've dabbled in Mythic. Got really close to cutting edge, and I think that like we're probably the least represented community in like WoW content creation, right? I think a lot of the people are either, really hardcore, and like a lot of the other people are more so into the lore. They kind of raid when they can. And Guck and I think, play a lot, and we try to push content at an above average level, right? Which I think is where probably most people start each expansion. And then as the numbers dwindle because people quit because they get frustrated or whatever, you see that player base start to shrink. And I think that's why like Guck and I continue this podcast, and why we started it in like anyway, just because of more maybe the lack of content creators that played the game in a way that we did.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have the people who are in on the alpha and in early on the beta with their own private beta server, and they're doing raid strat testing already. That's the upper limit. And there is a good wealth of content out there for those players and by those players. And yeah, like you said, there's also the mount collectors, the pet battle farmers, like all of the achievement farming, transmog farming, all of the stuff on the what most players would say is more the casual lower level. There's plenty of guides out there for that too. But then like you said, that content right in the middle, that is and has always been our goal, because that is what we represent. And yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
We are striving. Yeah, we're definitely striving to be better. Like, I don't know if we've mentioned our goals on the podcast for Shadowlands, but like, we are in a guild together, and we kind of stopped raiding. We went into full Shadowlands prep mode. We have I would say a pretty sizable roster going into the expansion with a lot of hard decisions to be made, and we're pushing for cutting edge. If it happens the first tier, cool. I think our expectations will probably be for the second tier, and I'm really looking forward to what this expansion brings to you and I, and our guild and our community and everybody that listens to this podcast. And I hope that it's the next big thing for WoW. I hope it brings in as many subscribers as Wrath of the Lich King had. You know what I mean? Who knows? So I'm pumped.
Yeah, I totally agree. Anything else you want to add before we wrap this Barrens Chat birthday special?
No, thank you for listening. Happy birthday, Barrens Chat Pod. Really appreciate everybody tuning in.
Thanks again for listening to all of you. Again, we are so appreciative. This is massive. We're glad that you've been with us for a year. We're excited for another year with you. As always, check us out on Twitter at Barrens Chat Pod, at Saudi LOL, at Guckyman. You can find our other contact info on the website. That's barrenschat.podbean.com. And we will see you guys in the next one.